Nurse Mickelson, one of the steadiest defensemen for the team throughout training camp.
Bernie Wolf, as his hair is howled by his teammates in front of the Washington goal.
It was just about a year ago that Gary Green joined Washington as the youngest coach in the history of the National Hockey League.
Maruk and a 2-on-1. Maruk score.
Welcome to our weekly repeat of the, well, not a repeat of our Zoom programs as we go on. So great to see repeat members. Also great to see some of our new joiners today as well. So thank you all for coming on and helping make the pandemic a little bit more of a pleasant situation, if that can be possible, and to enlighten us with some hockey stories as we go through things today. As always, we want to thank Paul Patskow and Laura Evans. Laura specifically today because it was her suggestion that we do the Washington Capitals theme today. So thank you, Laura, and thank you, Paul, as always, and thank all of you for joining us. We've got some great panelists today that really pleased to have on board as well, and they're going to talk to us about the lean, later on the green, and the mean in between as well of the Washington Capitals through the franchise's history as well. So welcome, if you will. We've got Bill Mickelson today. We've got Bernie Wolf as well, Dennis Maruk, Gary Green. We've got Glenn Dreyfus, who's going to talk about the history of the Capitals franchise through a great book called The Legends of Landover, Long Lost Stories of the Washington Capitals. So thank you all, and we'll get things going today. So I'm going to start chronologically, if that's okay with everybody. And we're going to go back to the very, very beginning of the franchise, 1974-75. And that inaugural season was an interesting one. An expansion draft took place, and Bill Mickelson had a really interesting sidebar to this whole event. He was an inaugural member of the New York Islanders and had been part of their expansion draft, and then a couple of years later joined the Washington Capitals as part of their expansion draft. So Bill, I want to welcome you and thank you so much for joining us. And you were part of that 74-75 team. It's in the history books, and it was a tough year for everybody. Back then, it wasn't like the Vegas Golden Knights where they were able to draft a team that would go on to the Stanley Cup final that year. It's going to take some time to grow and go from there. But Bill, let's relive that first season anyway. Tell us about being one of the first members of the Washington Capitals team. Some of the things that went on, the good times, maybe some of the challenging times as well that you went through. You won 8 games that season, but lost 67 and tied 5. It had to be challenging, but I hope there were a lot of laughs that went along with that as well. Bill, tell us a little bit about that first season.
I guess mentioning the Islanders too, you people see that I've had quite an experience, NHL experience with expansion teams. Mm-hmm. I was, I guess, since I got notice of this yesterday, I've been comparing, the two teams, the expansion Islanders and the expansion Capitals, and there's I guess there's a lot of similarities between the teams, and Bernie can probably attest to it because I think he knows a lot of the players that were on that original 74-75 team. I should say, Kevin, it would be nice if there was another member of that team here so I wouldn't have to take all the heat from the 74-75 squad.
They all ducked away, Bill, but they said, hey, push Bill Mickelson forward. He's the guy. So
yeah, that's what Yvonne Labre told me, too.
What's that?
Yvonne Labre. He couldn't make it. It would have been nice to have him, too. We'll get him another time.
Yeah. For a player like me, and I guess most of the players on that team, we were all, like good American leaguers, I guess. So to have a chance to play in the NHL, no matter what, under whatever circumstances, was terrific, and it was difficult, but at the same time, what an experience. And when I look back on it now, it was all positive. And I think back on, like Bernie's a great example. I think mostly I don't think much about the hockey. I think most about the players and the the times that you have outside of the rink. And I don't remember, like I had, my plus minus situations and everything, but at the time, I don't remember that being a big issue or anything. I remember the guys in the team and and all the players can relate to this, the time in the dressing room, the time on the buses and the planes and in the airports and things like that. And I look back on the players more than anything, and the same with both teams. And just, I think the thing that got us all through, especially 74, 75, was the character makeup of all the players on that team. I thought they were all, when I look back now, they were all great guys. They were just, good human beings. There's characters. There's a lot of comedians, like Tommy Williams and Denny DuPerry, Pete Laframboise, and, just some examples of guys that were upbeat and funny all the time. And looking back, I guess you remember the highlights like that, the people. I had an experience that year too, like a personal one that really detracted from that season. Not in any way that it impacted my hockey at all, but in early October, I think we were about, like maybe 6, 7, or 8 games into the season. And, I don't want to mention a downer here, but my brother was killed in a car accident.
Oh, geez.
The most vivid memory, of that year is that situation. And I can't think of that year without thinking of that particular incident. And it sort of, impacted the whole year in a sense, but I don't think it had any impact on my hockey at all. In fact, if anything, it might have been a positive even. But that's the one thing, like it's been 45 years now since then. And after 45 years, and I haven't been around hockey circles and hockey players the guys on here that are involved in hockey, you're maybe around players all the time. So you talk about stuff and you talk about stories like that. I haven't been around the hockey community other than, my kids and their teams and whatever. So the memories I have are mostly made up of highlights and lowlights and things like that. And I think the guys on here, will find that to be the same thing too. It's it's the good times, the highlights, the good things that happened. And I don't remember, at the time suffering that much. And I think, again, it's because of a lot to do with the character of the playoff. And, there was a lot of laughs, in the bars and, everywhere else. That's what I remember most is the players. And I think all the other guys on here too would say the same thing. When you look back on your careers, you remember the players.
Bill, tell us about some of the leadership group that was there, some of the players who kind of led you through and maybe, when things were tough and weren't going so well, who helped keep the team strong, moving forward, still playing at the highest level possible as well.
I think the number one guy for me would be Doug Moens.
Oh, really? Of course, veteran.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize, in trying to recall things from that year, going back, I didn't realize that Dougie was 40 years old at the time.
Wow.
He and I lived, Greg Jolly and Ron Lowe we all lived in the same apartment block in Landover, not far from the Capitol Center. And we used to drive to practice all the time. And that's something else that, between the Islanders and Washington that was challenging during the year was the commutes that we had to our practice rinks. Long Island, the place where we played at the Coliseum, I drive, half or 3/4 of an hour in one direction. We'd all put on all our equipment there, grab our skates and sticks, get on a bus, and then go like an hour and a half right by my home in the other direction out on Long Island to practice. And Washington was the same way in Tyson Corners. where the old Capitol Center was. We used to truck around the, what do they call it? It's not the ring road, it's the
Beltway. Beltway.
Yeah, and Dougie and I, we commuted together every day, so I got to know Dougie pretty well. And he's somebody, you know, he'd been around for years. He'd been a star in the league. You know, he's a guy that I'd watched on TV, and very good player, and just a perfect gentleman. He was just outstanding. I think he had a pretty outstanding career in business after his hockey career. So he's one. Tommy Williams was another.
Right.
A card. Bernie, you would know him well.
Yep.
Dennis DePerry is another funny guy, and I mentioned Pete Laframboise. I think those would be the main guys. Ivan LeBray,
Yeah.
on the blue line, is another one, and you know he's one of the few of us that lasted a few seasons with the organization. I think those would be. I'm probably missing somebody, but I think those would be the major ones. Most of us were pretty young. That was a very young team as compared to the Islanders. The expansion Islanders had, you know, like older guys on there, Eddie Westfall and Terry Crisp, Don Blackburn, Arnie Brown, Ron Stewart was there for a while. So there were some veterans there, but in Washington, we were all pretty, other than Dougie and Tommy, we were all kids. I was one of the older ones, probably.
How old would you be, Bill?
I think 26 that year. Most of the guys were 23, 24.
Gotcha. Bill, we think of Milt Schmidt as a Boston Bruin, a legend, a Hall of Famer. We forget the fact that he was part of the management group of the Washington Capitals that year too. Did you have much interaction with Milt Schmidt back in the day?
Not very much, no.
No.
And again, you know, when I mentioned you think back on the negative times, the most vivid recollection I have of talking to Milt was I was sent down at the end of the year to Richmond and getting the phone call from Milt telling me I was going. And to talk about bad news, you know, that's or low lights of the year. That's another memorable one. No, Milt's like Doug Moens. Everything I described about Doug Moens, you could describe about Milt too. And I didn't see, you know, like Milt was around at practice, but I don't remember many interactions with him or conversations or anything like that. There seemed to be, maybe it's different today, but it seems to me that, you know, at the time, and maybe it was, you know, we just had the one coach too. Like today, you've got a lineup behind the bench. We just had one guy, right?
Yeah.
And it seemed that conversations, even at that, were limited, and it's probably because the coaches couldn't spread himself around enough.
You know, the Mickelson name still resonates today. We talked about it a little bit before the program started too, but you have a son who went on to the NHL and a daughter certainly who's represented Canada very, very well in international hockey as well. Talk to us a little bit about your children.
Yeah, that's certainly been a highlight in my life. You know, when my own personal career ended, I certainly stayed connected with the game and I guess somewhat kept up to date with hockey and how it's evolved over the last 45 years, you know, because of them. You know, like the changes in the game, the changes in the players, the changes in technology and everything else. It is because of them. And they just, you know, like any kid in Canada, they just, you know, when they were little, they just went out and they played every sport they could. Both of them gravitated towards hockey and became somewhat good at it in their minor careers. And I think, like all kids, they just continued to progress to a point where they you know, made livings out of it, I guess you could say. And it's just been terrific, you know, from a personal perspective, to be able to follow them and their careers and their ups and downs. And I'll tell you, some of the stress I've experienced in hockey has been because of them, not through, it doesn't compare to some of my own personal experiences, or not as I recall them anyway. You know, watching my daughter's played in 3 Olympic gold medal games now, and I can't think of anything more stressful for a parent than going through that.
Very good. We were talking about Brendan Mickelson and Megan Mickelson, so just wanted to make sure that we identified them and gave them their due as well. Wonderful to see them both play. So that's terrific. Great, Bill.
They're both still playing too. My son's in Sweden right now. He's in Modo, waiting for the season to start there. They're not experiencing the same problems with the coronavirus to the extent that we are, anyway. So they played 8 exhibition games already and are about to start. And my daughter, she's trying to make it to Beijing in a couple years. So she's got 2 kids. I don't know how she's doing it. And she's almost 37, but she's not hanging them up yet.
Terrific. We had her involved with an event that I oversee called Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer, and she was outstanding joining us as well. So got a chance to get to know Megan a little bit as well. Terrific. Yeah. Thank you, Bill. We're going to move on to Bernie Wolf now for a few minutes, if you don't mind. Bernie, how's it going with you?
Everything's good. We're safe and we're healthy. And so that's the most important thing in today's world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. You took a different route to the National Hockey League than most players, going through the Canadian University route that way. Bernie, tell us about playing hockey at university and how it evolved into being picked up as a free agent by the Washington Capitals in '74.
College hockey was great. I played for Sir George Williams University in Montreal. It's called Concordia, and I walked on. No one even wanted me, so I just walked on and tried out, and I made the team as a backup goaltender. Sat on the bench for the first 2 games, and then was put in on the 3rd game and never came out until I graduated.
Fantastic.
So, it was, you're right. There were not many players in the NHL in my day that went through the college route to the point where I was known as Joe College. Not that I sat on a bus reading the Wall Street Journal or anything, but I was, Bob Paradise and myself, I think, might be the only ones that at that time had the college degree. But in any event, Houston owned my rights in the World Hockey League, and Washington owned my rights. Well, LA, and then they traded me to Washington in my last college game.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. And Billy Taylor was the scout for Washington. It was the Canadian Championship game, 1974. And apparently after the first period, LA traded the rights to Washington, and they signed me in June at the draft, not being drafted, at the Queen Elizabeth Hotel in Montreal.
Very good.
Yeah.
Billy Taylor is an interesting name, of course, because he was banned from hockey for the longest time for gambling, and then was reinstated long enough to become a scout. Did you get to know Billy very well, Bernie?
Just around the hockey. I thought he was a wonderful guy. I don't know what really happened or didn't happen, but I'll tell you, as far as Bernie Wolf is concerned, he was a classy guy, and it was nice to be around.
Excellent. You make your NHL debut the 1975-76 season, the second season for the Washington Capitals. Still trying to find their way there. Bernie, you're a goaltender, and you're getting lots of shots, playing phenomenal hockey, but with a team that was struggling to some degree. Let's talk about that first season, if you will.
It was tough. I had come from a college team that we made the Final Four twice, and in the Canadian thing, and we were a pretty good hockey team. We were used to winning, and as a professional, we all have egos, and it was very, very difficult to lose as often as we did. And as a goaltender, I started to get into a thought process that I wanted to keep this game respectable. It wasn't that I wanted to win the game, but I wanted to keep it respectable and not embarrass myself or embarrass our team. And I think that came on because we lost so often, and it's a bad way of approaching a game. But I was in the NHL. We were skating around in a pregame warm-up in Montreal, and Ken Dryden, when we passed, and Ken said, you know, "Hi, Bernie." Hi, Kenny. He said, "It must be awful playing for Washington." And I remember, you know, sometimes I don't remember what I ate for breakfast, but I do remember what I said to him was, "Ken, it's still the NHL."
Absolutely.
I was very thankful of being in the NHL.
Well said, Bernie.
Yep, for sure. You know, you split the crease with Ron Lowe. Did you get to know Ron fairly well? I mean, you know.
Yeah. Ronnie was a great person, great goaltending partner. The Washington Post wrote a story about the both of us and called us the odd couple. He was a pig farmer from Manitoba, and I was a college graduate from Montreal, from the city. And he didn't have running water in his house, and you know, it was good, but he was an excellent goaltender, and learned a lot from him.
Fantastic. By the next season, the next couple of seasons, some veterans came to the Capitals, and I wondered what kind of influence guys like Roger Crozier and Gary Smith may have had on you, even though well, Roger was there for much longer in an executive position, but Gary wasn't there that long. Did they have much impact on you as a goaltender or as a person, Bernie?
No, I had a lot of fun with Gary Smith. We were in LA one night before the Kings game, and he owned horses, and at the old Forum right across the street was Hollywood Park, I think it was called, and one of his horses were there. So we went over to see his horse, and he started patting the horse, and the horse bit him on the stomach. So, you know, it wasn't funny at the time, but when you really think back about this thing, you know, you can't make that up. And I just thought he was quite the character. He wore like 7 pair of socks under his skate, you know, before he put his skates on, and he was just different, a good goaltender. Roger didn't play that much with us. He was, yeah, like you said, more of an executive. He was still having, well, at that time, a lot of stomach problems and ailments. And so he played very, very few games.
Gotcha. I'm going to veer into an area that's a little bit delicate here, so please bear with me, Bernie. But sports can be cruel, just like the world can be cruel sometimes. And I just wonder if you encountered any prejudices against you because of the fact that you were a Jewish hockey player in a traditionally white Anglo-Saxon Protestant sport at that particular time. Did that come to the fore at all?
You know, it's fun. It's an excellent question. Because remember, I was playing with Mike Marson.
Right.
In fact,
Yeah.
I'll tell you a quick story about Mike, but to answer the question, my entire NHL career, not one anti-Semitic remark directed at me. Not one.
So hear that. That's wonderful.
So I'll just tell you a quick story about Mike Marson, who's still a good friend and all that. Abe Poland and his wife Irene, we bumped into them on the boardwalk in Rehoboth, Delaware, and Abe was with another couple, and he stopped me. "Bernie, how are you?" This is many years ago, of course. And Abe was a wonderful man, and he was bragging. He started bragging to his friends that he was the first owner to have both a Jewish player and an African American player on the team. And I said, "That's right, Abe, and you roomed us together."
Oh,
And
really?
yes, Abe didn't know this. Abe didn't have he wasn't involved in that. And I don't know if it was intentional by Red Sullivan or Milt Schmidt, but Mike and I became great friends. And but Mike wasn't as fortunate as me in regards to comments. He had a much tougher time from other players and fans, and it was very, very sad.
Maybe I can get Bill to join us here for a moment too, just concerning Mike Marson. You know, we hear so often, especially lately, that he joined the Hockey Hall of Fame, but Willie O'Ree breaking the color barrier. I'm going to kind of change that definition for a second. He definitely was the first player of color in the NHL, but in many ways, I look at Mike Marson as the person who broke the color barrier, because there was such a gap between Willie O'Ree and Mike joining the National Hockey League. And it was only after Mike joined the National Hockey League that players of color started to join the league, slowly but surely. But Mike was a terrific hockey player. Maybe you can both comment on Mike Marson. Bill, you would have seen him in that inaugural season. He was a good goal scorer. Bernie, you saw him as well, as you were back in the crease while he was up front. Maybe you can talk just a tiny bit about Mike Marson.
Are you talking to me, Kevin?
Yeah, why don't we start with you, Bill, if you don't mind?
Okay, yeah, Mike, let me see, Greg Jolly was the first pick, and I think Mike might have been the second pick that year.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, you still see him, do you, Bernie?
I saw him at the Canadian Embassy here in Washington when Willie O'Ree was there, and it was the NHL. I think it may have been the Hockey Hall of Fame there. The embassy hosted everybody, and I was invited by the embassy. So I saw Mike. I hadn't seen him in a long time, but it was really good to see him.
Yeah. Well, if you see him again, say hello to him for me. He was, I thought he was just a great guy. He was just like a physically son for a 9-year-old. He had lived in the weight room or something. He just, well built. I mentioned the guys I think back on. He's one of them. He was an outstanding individual. Personality. He was a character. Fun to be around, right, Bernie?
Yeah, no, he's fun. And what a skater. He could skate like, there was no tomorrow. He was a very talented hockey player.
Yeah, and he was as wide as he was tall. He was just a tank of a player, a guy you didn't want to go into the corner with, and skilled as well.
Yep.
I don't.
He
Bernie,
drives a streetcar now.
Yeah, well,
Streetcar driver now, and he wants to write a book about his experiences, but he's a little hesitant about there's a lot of bad things that happened to him, poor guy.
Yeah, no way.
Are there things, Bernie, that happened that year, 74, 75?
Well, I remember once we were in Maple Leaf Gardens, and I don't know, Dennis, if you were there at the time, and it was either Milt Schmidt or Tommy McVie, I think, was the coach, and came in and spoke to Mike privately. And I guess just a couple of hours prior to that, his brother had died in Toronto, and Mike just quietly left out. But I know Mike took that very hard, and for obvious reasons. And I just think when I saw Mike recently, he didn't have that big smile on his face like I remember back in the 70s when we played.
Yeah, he's one of the, there were a lot of guys there that I recall were sort of happy-go-lucky guys, like Pete Laframboise, Tommy Williams. Mike was like that too. Ronnie Lowe, that you know well. They were funny guys and fun guys and upbeat, it seems, all the time. So when you're struggling through a season like that, it's great to be around people like that. That have that character. Back on the issue that you mentioned with Mike Marson, I'm quite surprised to hear that. I don't know whether I missed something, but I don't recall, certainly not any. I don't recall myself any incidents with players on the team. I thought he was liked and respected by everybody, and I don't know what you're referring to when you mention that.
It was a game in New York, and one of the Ranger players, and I know then Bill Riley followed right after, and he was he was targeted as well with racist comments. It happened, and a lot, of course, coming from the fans.
Yeah.
It was
certainly. I didn't notice nothing from players.
Yeah.
While I've got you both here for the moment, the Kansas City Scouts joined the NHL the same time the Washington Capitals did, but they only lasted a couple of seasons. Financial reasons, challenges on the ice, and yet Washington was able to persevere, and continue on and still around today as well. Can you talk about that a little bit, about, you know, what it would take for a franchise to get over the hump to be able to continue on? Is it ownership? Is it fan base? Maybe you can talk a tiny bit about the parallels between Kansas City and Washington back in the 1970s.
The only thing I could say is winning does a lot of, you know, keeps teams around. Also,
Sure.
having an owner that has some staying power. And Abe Poland owned the building. He owned at the time they were called the Washington Bullets. They're now the Wizards in the NBA. And he owned a lot of real estate as well. So very, very wealthy family. And so they had staying power. But there was times, probably back in the about 76 or 77, where they did something called Save the Caps. And there was some talk of the team either moving or folding, but that never happened. And obviously, from a personal selfish standpoint, I was glad because my contract had deferred comp in it. And so I was quite concerned. Deferring a small salary and then not getting it would be very painful. But they hung in there, and now I think probably for the last 15 plus years, they've sold out every game.
Wonderful.
And the arena was a little bit closer to where people could get to, versus Kansas City's arena was way out there in the slaughterhouses, you know, where they had all the cows, and when you drove in, you could smell the cattle. And so I think it would be probably difficult for people to get to that arena. It was called Kemper Arena. And so in Washington, we were all fortunate. Washington hung around, and it's great to see them now.
Absolutely. Just to kind of wrap things up with your side, Bernie, you've been involved with the Caps alumni for some time now. Can you talk about the fraternity of guys who wore the red and white through the years? Red, white, and blue. There we are.
Yeah. No, I was the president for the alumni for 15 years, even though our charter said that we were supposed to elect someone every second year. I started spending almost all the hockey season in living in Florida, in Naples. And so I suggested that they pick another president. It was a difficult transition to the point where now the team itself has taken over. But we did some great things during the early years and raised, our primary charity was the Children's Inn at NIH, which was similar to the Ronald McDonald House. And we gave them, for just a small group of players, about $500,000 over about a 10-year period. And we did a golf tournament every year, and we gave the money there. But we had a good time. We would get together for a couple of meetings. But you know what? When you don't win a cup or even a banner, most of the guys left. As soon as the season ended, they went back to Canada, to Europe, to wherever they lived. There was only a few of us that made Washington, D.C., the Maryland area, Virginia area, our homes. And so it was very, very difficult to get a big group like the Islanders. After they won the cup, all those guys hung around. So they had a great alumni team and so on, and because the players hung around. With Washington, we put an alumni team together, but there was probably only a handful that actually played for Washington. The rest were, so it was difficult. And I say it's difficult because we never won. There was no reason for people to hang around. That's the way I looked at it.
Got it.
But we had a good time. We gave back a lot to the community. And hey, to this day, I thank hockey for the doors that it opened for me and my career.
Terrific. And what is that career? Tell us about what you're doing these days, Bernie.
Well, about 40 some years ago, I started Bernard Wolf and Associates. We are a financial service firm. Basically, my wife likes to describe it. I play with money all day long. We manage money. And back in about 3-4 years ago, I was fortunate enough, a private equity firm, Warburg Pincus, they're worldwide, so they're probably in Canada, asked to acquire my company. And while I still run it, I don't own it any longer, but I still enjoy it. I love working with people. And so, like I said, I'm very fortunate, but I'm not naive enough to think that that success in my second career was just because of me. It was because of hockey and the doors that it opened. And till this day, people still send me the bubblegum cards to sign from all over the world. And you know, I can't say enough about hockey, and I'm glad for the Washington Capitals, because wasn't good enough probably to make other teams. So expansion was great for me.
Very, very good. Wonderful. Great stuff. Well, we're going to talk about another alumnus now who gives back a great deal, but he certainly gave a great deal on the ice as well. And we want to bring Dennis Maruk into the picture now too. Dennis, welcome, and thank you for joining us today too. You were part of the big advancement of the Capitals at the time, where they transversed, I guess I'll use the term, from being a team that was a struggling team to a team that, first of all, came close to making the playoffs, and then finally, for the first time, made the playoffs as well. So, Dennis, maybe you can talk about joining the team. We talk about you in glowing terms. Here's a guy who was a terrific goal scorer, terrific point getter, and yet you played on some teams that really, really struggled through the years. And maybe you can talk about joining the Washington Capitals, what that was like for you, and how you were able to achieve 50 goals one season, 60 the next season, with a team that was still going through its changes.
How much time do I have? How much time do I have?
We've got the timer up now.
You want to talk about the California Golden Seals and the Cleveland Barons?
Yeah.
And then Cleveland and Minnesota North Stars merging, and that's how I ended up getting to Washington. I was traded there for a first round pick in 1978 and played 5 years there with the Capitals. Yeah, and got to know Bernie extremely well there. We were good friends.
Very good. Well, so let's talk about that 80-81 season, where all of a sudden you got the rarefied air of scoring 50 goals, which was, it's not like it didn't happen, but it didn't happen very often. And here's a guy who, again, playing with a team that was in the bottom half of the league, scoring 50 goals. Tell us about being able to do that, your line mates, the team at the time as well. And I mean, it wasn't like you just appeared out of nowhere, because you were a prolific scorer in junior, certainly with the teams that you mentioned earlier too, but hitting 50 goals, what an achievement that was, Dennis.
Yeah, it was pretty nice. I had a lot of help. I know that from the guys I played with, which was Bob the Hound Kelly and Jean Pronovo. I was the young centerman. So I got a lot of help from those guys. They were experienced and more mature, and they were able to make things work for me. And there was no doubt about it. Jean was a good shooter, and Bob the Hound was a more corner man and all that. So we gelled pretty good as a line at that time. Going through the tough times, as Bernie said, I went through the Save the Caps campaign and the whole problem, and starting to see some kind of light in the tunnel about getting some better players and good draft picks and players coming in. Mike Gartner, Ryan Walter, Rick Green. You go on and on about other guys, and then of course when they made the big trade. So when they let go Rick Green and Ryan Walter and got Rod Langway, Brian England, Doug Jarvis, and Craig Laughlin. So that was a big change for the Washington Capitals, that trade.
Yeah, it sure was. Why don't we introduce Gary Green at the same time, because your careers kind of intersected around that time. But here you are, you are coach of the year in Peterborough in the OHA. You won a couple of championships, and at 26 years old, you're stepping behind the bench in the National Hockey League. Talk about how that happened and your feelings. Was there trepidation? Was there confidence because of your successes to that point? What led you to that point there, Gary?
Was I 26? I thought I was only 12, Dennis. Wasn't I only 12 when I took over coaching you?
You look
Give yourself-
12.
Give yourself some credit. Come on now. I'll keep quiet now.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead.
You keep quiet. You know something, Kevin? It was something that because of my great mentor who was above my shoulder, a left shoulder right now, and who was a tremendous inspiration to me and as a guidance as to how to coach, because I wanted to coach, Roger Nielsen. Then
Right.
really, I mean, age wasn't the factor in my situation. I mean, look, I look back at it now and say, my God, if I could have had those 20, 30 years experience, and I was always asked that question, is that wouldn't you like to have had 20, 30 years more experience in coaching? Of course I would have. I didn't have that opportunity. So was I going to take the opportunity as it stood? Absolutely. Did I feel that that it was the same game that I had learned up through my growing years as a player, as modest as a playing careers that I had? My best friend that still is my best friend today, and I am only moments away from him back here in my hometown of Tillsonburg, Colin Campbell, that runs the National Hockey League, is that we grew up together. We enjoyed the game together. I experienced Roger Nielsen because that was Colin's first coach in junior hockey with the Peterborough Petes. And so from that point onwards is that really my success in Peterborough was attributed to the good players that we had drafted and that I had helped scout and that I had selected as general manager. And I think as every coach that's ever coached the game knows full well is that it's the players on the ice that create the opportunity for you to be a successful coach. I remember Scotty Bowman one time saying to me, Kevin, he said, and Scotty and I, of course, Scotty was a former coach with the Peterborough Petes organization. And Scotty, and when I was a broadcaster, a long-time broadcaster, and would sit in the offices with coaches and general managers and talk hockey, Scotty said to me, you know the key to being a good successful coach, Greener? He said, you got to pick good teams to coach. And I said, well, you don't always have that opportunity as a coach when you want to coach in the National Hockey League to select your teams by any means. But putting all of that aside is that that I felt when I came to Washington, and I think, Dennis, I don't know whether you remember my my so-called speech when I came to the Sheraton Hotel my first night after flying in from Hershey, and that was that I don't expect the players to respect me as a coach. I really didn't in the dressing room because I was a young coach. I didn't have the credentials that Scotty Bowman and Al Arbor and Roger Nielsen and on the Bob Holford and the likes of the great coaches had. All I asked them was at that point in time was to give me a couple of weeks just to be able to open their ears and let me have the abilities to try to put in some systems that would in fact try to make them a better team. And if they chose after those few weeks that it didn't work, then I knew full well as a coach in the NHL, my butt would be out the door so fast that you'd be like the Macy revolving doors. So in which case, that was kind of my inaugural opportunity in coaching a good bunch of players. And were we a great team? No, by no means. But were we a good, solid group of guys? And yes, we were. And I really did enjoy thoroughly my guys that I coached there, and we had all different characters, Dennis being one of them. But we moved up the ladder from a respect around the National Hockey League and a togetherness of a team, and that I'm appreciative of because of the players, not because of what I did, but because of the players that took the ball and ran with it.
Well, maybe, so Dennis mentioned a couple of the players who were on the team at the time, Jean Pronovo, Bob Kelly as well. We had Mike Palmatier in the goal for a little bit as well. Mike Gartner, Ryan Walter. Maybe you can bounce off each other. Talk about some of the players who are on the team, what they brought to the team, the fun that you may have had with them at the time as well, and how you came so close to making the playoffs in that season, 1980-81.
Can I just say something to Mr. Green? Because of his coaching, he taught me to become a better hockey player, all-around player. And I think he realized that I had the good offensive ability to produce points and assists and all that kind of stuff, but I lacked the defensive part of the game, and it took some time, but I became a better all-around player because of Mr. Green.
Wow, that's quite an accolade.
Well, let me just bounce off of that, Kevin, for everyone's knowledge, is that that I saw the incredible capabilities, and I knew that beforehand of Dennis from his London Knights days, is that this guy had fire in his belly, and he had tremendous offensive abilities. So I can remember very well what I was trying to convince Dennis is that that if, and I remember this this meeting with you, Dennis, is that saying that, Dennis, you are so damn skilled on our team, is that if you would come back into our own end zone further, is that I want you being the one that after our defenseman goes into the corner and muscles it out, I want you taking the puck. I want you being the guy that leads us out of our own end zone and then setting up, you know, our opportunity to get in the offensive zone. And if you come back and help us out with all of the skill that you possess, then you will not only make us a better team, but you will become a player who plays more in the offensive zone, so you'll take advantage of all of your great skills. So never mind being just a 30-goal scorer, which is very impressive for any player in the National Hockey League. But I can remember saying to you, you could become much more than that because we'll spend more time in the offensive zone where you'll really capitalize. And I was so proud of Dennis because of the fact that with just a little bit of nudging, he took that to heart and he ran with that. You know, he didn't need a coach like myself to do because he digested that. And as a smart player that he was, he took that into play. Now, at the same time, and I no doubt, and Danny, I might be wrong here, but I was also thinking that he's got some bonus clauses here. That if he scores more goals, he's going to get more money. And as a result, then I think this explanation makes more sense to him, and he's a smart guy, so he's going to take this, which is only going to help us. But what I was really proud of him once I got my time had come and I got fired and was in the broadcast booth was the fact that that when he ended up going to Minnesota and nearing the end of his career, is that his defensive capabilities were well understood because there he was out there killing penalties. He was on a fourth line at times. He was checking, and I thought, you know something, you know that that really is a tribute to Dennis's because he was he became an all-around player.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Very good.
Dennis, it was also funny because let me tell you one story. Because we had Paul Mulvey on our team that was a giant, and he was a tough guy, and he fought a lot of guys in the National Hockey League. And Bernie, you remember Paul well, and we ended up in LA airport, standing out, waiting for a bus. It was not the charter days. We came in on commercial, and the rookies sat in the middle seat. You know the deal. Is that Dennis had a pinstripe suit on, always well dressed. So did Paul Mulvey. So there we are out waiting. I'm trying to phone and figure out where this bus is, and so there's Dennis Maruk and Paul Mulvey both in, and I step out to the curbside where the team is waiting for this bus, and somehow they had switched jackets, if you remember, Dennis.
Yeah.
And Paul could not get on Dennis's jacket, but he was like this. And meanwhile, Dennis had on Paul's jacket that was hanging down. And Dennis was reaching up in the air with his hand and going, "The plane, boss, the plane."
I remember that. It was funny. So, it was good.
You talk about the good times and funny times. Is that I've repeated that one a number of times, Dennis.
Thank you. I remember that. It was fun.
Talk about some of the guys on the team who really were part of that leadership group as well, and who helped take you to the next level.
I'll talk. You can go have Garts and all that, but I'll talk about the guys I played with when I scored the 60 goals that season. Ryan Walter, and Chris Valentine. Nobody even knows. Sometimes you play with who? Chris Valentine, and he was a shifty, good scorer. Didn't have a lot of speed, and Ryan was great. A strong kid coming out of junior there, and we could fight and all that bounce, but he could also score and make plays. But I'd have to say a guy like Ryan Walter, that trade was a big reason why that trade went, because he was so great of a hockey player and a great leader. There was no doubt at a young age, he was just a strong leader. And then of course, Rick Green on defense. He was the main guy in the blue line for us, and he played well. So there was a lot of guys that came, even the guys from Europe that came, Bent Gustafson and Rolfie Edberg and all those guys. There were some great players, and there's no doubt about it. We just didn't have enough going around. It started to get better.
Yeah,
like with
for sure.
Gartz, you look at Gartz. We can go on and on, talk about how great a hockey player and a great individual and a man he is.
Well, definitely. I mean, as Dennis has alluded to, I mean, those were good young players. And Ryan Walter was a solid two-way player. He was a tough guy, as Dennis had mentioned, and he was a valuable leader on and off the ice for us. And likewise was Mike Gartner, the master blaster. Man, he could just blow down that right wing side and blast the puck like you couldn't believe. That's what they called him in Washington. Dennis, you'll remember.
Right, exactly.
The master blaster, and his speed is incredible in the National Hockey League. Rick Green was a defensive defenseman, without question. And I remember when I came to Washington, Bernie, you'll remember these days because you were living there, is that Rick was, unfortunately, as a first round draft choice, and Dennis, you'll recall this, he was getting booed. The fans were booing him because the Caps were losing and he was a first round draft choice. And when I came in to be the coach, and then the media asked Rick, they said, what do you think about having a new coach now who has the same last name as you? And he said, good. That's when the fans are booing. I'll just know that it was the coach and not me.
Mr. Calm, Cool, and Collective. Mr. Green, Calm, Cool, and Collective. There's no down, there's no up.
Exactly.
Right across the board of that, man. He still is.
Yeah, and he absolutely still is. And he's a wonderful human being. And with Rick is that I remember some of his strategies. Is that because as a big, strong guy, there was some ingredients of you as a coach that wanted him to go in and just hammer anybody that was in the corner, just blow them up and just like hammer them at the blue line. And then instead, Rick was that methodical defensive guy that was protected the front of the net and was making sure that, that he had his man. And I used to say to him, he said, Rick, why don't you just go in and smash a guy in the corner every now and then? You're big and you're strong. And he goes, something? I've never seen a guy score from the corner. Kind of stand out in front of the net area, then they got to come through me. And instead, why do I have to go into that corner and smash the guy? So how do you reason with that kind of logic? I mean, because he was right. But anyway, we had some really good characters and really good individuals there who definitely had good skill levels. And as Dennis pointed out, we had a really good nucleus of good guys there that had great talent. We just didn't have enough of them at the time because the league was so much stronger after the days of the WHA and the NHL combining together.
Gary, just to play on that a little bit more too, how did you command the room when many of the guys were older than you? Was there any challenge that way, or was everything okay because of the way that your approach was to the guys on the team?
I had Jean Pronovo, as Dennis mentioned, and I put a line together with Dennis and Bob Kelly, Bob the Hound Kelly, and Jean Pronovo. And Dennis was 37 years of age at the time, and I was a 26-year-old coach. Yeah. But I don't know, and maybe I'm just naive, Dennis, and you can speak to this far more so, but I didn't think that we had an age factor in there in the dressing room. I mean, it was all about communication, and it was about, having a strategy to win a game, and everyone, I mean, Dennis was as competitive as a guy as you could find. Hound Kelly was bitterly competitive. We had good character guys in our dressing room, but as we all know, it takes an abundance of skill in a team to be able to get it over. And we came so close being able to make the playoffs. 2 years in a row, Dennis, as you recall, we lost out in the last game of the season. It was heartbreaking, to us as an organization because we climbed the ladder so far. And we were also dealing with 454 man games missed because of injury, in that last year, which was devastating when you consider most teams' years of man games lost. But I do credit our guys through fighting right to the very end. But again, as I look back at those years very fondly because of the friendships that were made, the guys that helped push the button further ahead for the Washington Capitals
Make them
organization.
a better
And
team.
I want to also, as Bernie has alluded to, and Bill mentioned it, is that we had a great owner in Abe Poland. Think the world of the man, and I just I reiterate, so many things that that I think about Abe when it came to just being a solid, rock solid owner that hired people and let them do their job with no interference, and he was somebody that I was always very proud to work for. I used to joke about this and laugh because of the fact that Abe had just signed me to a new 3-year contract before I
So you got all the
a
money.
losing streak and got fired.
So you got all the money.
Oh yeah, I got it all, Dennis. Because they paid coaches. They paid
I scored
coaches
50
so well
goals,
back
you get
then.
0. Yeah.
Oh
okay.
yeah, no, they paid coaches so well back then. But Abe had, he had to fire me. I understood, and I went into the broadcast booth doing the game of the week, and I used to joke because of the fact that I always kept in good touch with Abe Poland. Abe come down and see me if we were doing the game of the week in the broadcast booth. Stop in and say hello.
Let me come back to you then, Dennis, if you don't mind. So
Okay, go ahead.
you had a career season in 81, 82, like a beyond belief season for you. You knew you had it in you, but all of a sudden you end up 4th in scoring, 136 points, 60 goals. That's really rarefied air at the time. You play in the All-Star game. What was the progression that got you up to that plateau, Dennis? Was it new line mates, a new philosophy, more ice time? What was it, Dennis?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things there. Of course, ice time was very valuable, and my line mates, Ryan Walter and Chris Valentine, and the support of the other players in the team. But because we played a lot, our line played a lot. We played a lot in the power play, and Brian Murray at the time, the coach, played us like I think we went about 8 games, 9 games where we didn't even get a goal out of the 3 of us, but he kept us together, and we just kept going on. We worked at things in practice and tried in the power play in the games. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it. But when you get a lot of goals like that, 60 goals, and I had 76 assists there. It's certainly not from just me. It has a lot to do with the guys you play with, because you just can't do it that way. They set me up. I got spots in front of the net, got rebounds, and I'm not a very big guy, but I had the quick hands, quick release, and I think that kind of confused some goalies at the time when I did shoot and score. But I consider myself a better playmaker than a goal scorer. Over the years, I enjoyed setting up guys, and that's what happened. We were able to do that with Ryan and Chris and set each other up and worked on some things, and it really worked. That year that I had 60 and Gretzky had 90, I could have had 75, 80 goals that year. It was just one of those years where everything was working. Everything we tried to do was working, and eventually we get in the playoffs. So there you go. And then of course the All-Star game was right in Washington. So that was an honor to represent the team in the city right there, and go to the White House, have lunch, and meet Mr. Reagan, and then have my parents there, and all that through the whole week. It was just a pretty exciting time for me in my life. But it really comes back that there's a lot of support that goes along with that, the coaches, and Brian Murray that gave me the opportunity, and other people that coached throughout my times before that gave me the opportunity to become better player. And I think it just kept going after the 50 goal season. People say, well, yeah, how did he do that? 5'8" guy, how did he get 50 goals? And then come back and have 60 goals, and they're going, well, maybe he is not a bad hockey player. You know what I mean? So it was an honor to be involved in that the class of 20 that have scored 60 goals. There's only been 20 to ever do it. And even though I didn't get to win the Stanley Cup, I'll think about those things.
Dennis, just remind you in that the last game of the season when you were ready to score your 50th goal. I don't know if you remember back that, but I was double shifting you then to try to get your 50th goal in the very last game.
And I remember, someone said, do you remember the game that you got? I said, no, they had to show me on YouTube. right? I remember my first goal when I played with the California Gold Seals and scored in Toronto. So they showed me YouTube, and it was kind of neat how that was done. So it's pretty cool. And thank you.
Dennis, you talked.
I knew you had a $25,000 bonus, Dennis. If you got 50 goals,
I think I had a pretty good one there. So,
yeah, you did have a pretty good bonus. I was double shifting you.
yeah.
Because I knew you'd share it with me. I knew you would.
I know. Thanks.
Dennis, you talked about the big trade in 82, 83, and it changed the complexion of the team, and the Washington Capitals made the playoffs for the very first time. Talk about the trade and how it changed the complexion of the team and the difference that it made in helping escalate the team into the playoffs.
Well, Gary could help with that, but I mean, I can also say that when you make a trade with two teams, you hopefully you get the better, but usually it doesn't work out. And I think you trade two great players in Washington, Ryan Walter and Rick Green, to Montreal, and then you're getting Rod Langway, Brian England, the top defensive centerman in the National Hockey League, Doug Jarvis, and then you got a great college player coming, Craig Laughlin. You know that your team is going to get better, especially defensively because of I'm not knocking the defensemen that were on the team during that time, but we weren't getting any better, and they needed to make a big move, which they did. Fortunately, you had to give up two good players too, but it really strengthened and changed the team of the Washington Capitals. Because you got a hockey Hall of Famer with Roddy, captain just took charge on the defensive side, and Brian England. So we had the check-in centerman. So it really did change the whole. And then of course that Patrick division was really tough.
Oh yeah.
Look at the Islanders. We had to go up against them, and look how strong they were. And we were a good team. We just didn't have that enough to get past them, and that's just the way it was. But I tell you, it was really exciting to get in the playoffs, because you look at my first 4 or 5 years, it was not really exciting. And my excitement was playing for Team Canada over in the World Championships. I got selected every year that we didn't make the playoffs. I got the opportunity to do that. So that was kind of nice to do that. So that's the positive side, looking at not making the playoffs. Got to go over and play against the best players in the European teams, the Russians, the Swedes, and Finns, and all that. So that was really exciting for me. But basically, it would have been nice to be able, as a Capital, to because I had some pretty good years there, to be there and win a Stanley Cup or be in the finals or something like that. That would have been really nice. And I'm really happy that things have really turned around, and they won the Stanley Cup, and I was really excited for that. And I know that we were a big part of it. We started that whole thing. I know Bernie is part of it, and Bill's part of it. It has to start somewhere, and it just escalated and it got to where it is. And it just, as Bernie said, they just sell out now. And I've been down there, and it's just exciting, man. It's just crazy, and love it.
Dennis, we've talked about the highs now. I'm going to move into a different area that was not quite as pleasant. And you wrote a phenomenal book, came out a couple of years ago, called Dennis Maruk, The Unforgettable Story of Hockey's Forgotten 60-Goal Man. And you revealed some things that were to me and to others as well. Yeah, there we go. Can you talk a little bit about the transition from hockey to a layman's life, as it were, and some of the challenges that you got into, if you're comfortable?
Ken Reed, of course, writing the book. Ken, he contacted me through another person, and we got Matt and started telling stories about certain things, and he just said, "You should write a book." I go, "Wait a minute, I got more stories. I got more things in my life to do, and to write a book." He said, "No." I said, "This would be great." And so we met a few other times, and I decided to, okay, let's do it. But I said I wanted to write and some things, and Ken, I want you to write, which we did. We kind of combined together and came up with the title. And then I read a lot of James Patterson books, so in the short chapters. So I said, I'm 60 years old. I scored 60 goals, and I want 60 chapters. That's how the book came about. If you read the book, there's all short chapters, and that's how we did it. And in there, of course, I brought into my personal life that post-career was, I know during the time when we were playing, You know, it was my part, it was mainly my fault, not preparing myself for post career. But we were told there was going to be a lot of doors open for us when we retired from the game, and I think there was very slim choices. So I struggled from job to job, and divorce, and all that, and I got to a place in Aspen, and I hit rock bottom. I don't mind telling people I hit rock bottom, and only people can tell you that they hit rock bottom. And people say, well, how do you know you hit rock bottom? Well, that you're a complete failure. You've lost things in your life. Things aren't working for you in relationships, your family, your children, your jobs, everything. And I got in my car in Aspen, Colorado, was driving to Vegas to end my life. And I ended up in Utah. I was so hammered that I was tired and pulled over. And instead of going down, turning off an exit, I just turned off a dirt road. And I stopped, and fellas passed out. The sun woke me up. I got out of my car, walked over about 5 feet, and that was the canyon, the cliffs. Well, I froze, and some good Lord or whatever, I said, what am I doing? Got back in my car, and I had called everybody, my friends and everybody, my kid, my children, and told them everything. That was it. And I went back, and I just drove home. It was like nothing happened. It was just, I think the cliff scared me.
Yeah.
And on the way, drive home all the way, and I spoke to my daughter and all that, and my son, and you get to realize that you can't do it on your own. If you're struggling mentally, you need to seek help, professional help. I tried to do it on my own, and it didn't work. And I know they have a lot of things today for the players, and I recommend any player that's struggling need to seek help. Don't try and take things upon yourself. And I think that's what happened to me. Thank God I have loving family, loving kids that supported me and made me a better man today.
Wow, Dennis, thank you for sharing that. That's it's heavy, but it's important, and especially in these days when mental health has become so prominent in too many lives. So thank you very, very much. Let me open it back up to all of the boys now, and you know, we'll get Bill and we'll get Bernie. We've got Gary there as well, and Dennis too. The Caps win the Stanley Cup in 2018. Once a Cap, always a Cap. You know, they, as Dennis alluded to, you build the team on the shoulders of guys like Bill Mickelson and Bernie Wolf and Dennis Maruk and Gary Green. Talk about the pride, I'm hoping, that you had when Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup for the first time, and nobody celebrated like that team that particular year after so many years of frustration. Maybe you can all weigh in a little bit with following the team and what you felt deep inside about seeing them hoist that cup. Bill, why don't we start off with you, if you don't mind?
I guess I have some. I played on 3 different teams in the NHL. I had a lot of pride in, you know, the Islanders, the success they had. Same with Washington. And yeah, I remember seeing in all the media and everything, talk about a celebration. Boy, those guys could. I wonder if they partied like that during the year too.
I don't know.
Did they have fun or what? That's and deservedly so too. So absolutely, I take pride in, you know, saying that I played on that in that organization, and same with the Islanders and the tremendous success that they had as well. They had their success a little sooner after I had left. They really had some really good, fortunate draft choices. You know, like guys like, you know, Danny Potvin. You know, like they just franchise players. There was 3 or 4 Trottier. After I'm just having
Mike Bossy, et cetera, et cetera.
Lauren Henning.
Yeah, Lauren Henning. Lauren was there the first year, as Billy Harris was as well. So yeah, they met with
Goring.
Butch Goring came in from LA. Yeah. Who's the the big guy, Gillies?
Clark Gillies, of course, yeah.
And
John Tonelli.
The year that I was with the Islanders, they called up two young guys from New Haven, Bob Nystrom and Gary Howitt.
Oh, wow.
And I'll tell you, you talk about, Dennis, you're talking about players changing a team. Those two guys changed our team. They were I just think the guys in the team couldn't believe these two kids coming up from New Haven, and they were both tough as nails, and they would fight anybody. And that's the year of the years of the Broad Street Bullies.
Right.
I remember going into Philadelphia, and they just took on everybody. They no fear. It was they were impressive. So they had a bunch of guys that came along right soon afterwards, and they met with a lot of success early. And I think because of those guys. But yes, you certainly take pride in all the teams you played on.
Very good. Bernie, I'm talking about Bernie Wolf now. Bernie, talk about what your impressions were of that 2018 success.
Well, I remember the game, and my wife and I were watching it. And when they were counting it down, we just looked at each other and we had tears in our eyes. It was, just couldn't believe it. Well, we hadn't really been involved. Well, we hadn't been involved with the team. Didn't go to a lot of the games because we were never in town. But to see them win the Stanley Cup, wow. I don't know if I could have been any happier if I was on the ice. I was in shock. I was in shock and so excited. I didn't know a lot of the players, but you know what? I was excited for the city of Washington. And I became even more excited and proud of the city of Washington because after they won the cup, there was zero arrests. There was no disorderly conduct, arrests. People were very, very civilized. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's high level in the park police of U.S. Park Police, they're called. And I said, did you have a lot of problems at the parade? And he said, we only had one problem, and that was Ovechkin. He wouldn't listen to us, and so we just let him do his thing. The fans were great. He was our only problem. And so proud of the city, how they handled it. I've seen so many other cities where they tip cars over, they burn tires, they do, even in Montreal, it should be used to winning Stanley Cups and things like that. There's rioting and not rioting, but looting and stuff like that. And Washington handled it with class, and I was proud of that.
Speaking of class, Gary Green, why don't you talk about your internal feelings when you saw that cup hoisted over a Washington Capitals uniform?
Well, I can tell you right after it happened that I texted Ted Leonsis and Dick Patrick and congratulated them, and I had that warm feeling as the rest of the guys that have spoken about it, and for me, especially with Alex Ovechkin, who I admired a great deal as a great leader on that hockey club. There's a funny YouTube video that's still out there because as a broadcaster covering the All-Star game when Alex first became an All-Star, which was early in his career, and TSN at the time said, Gary, you have to interview Alex Ovechkin. So in which case he came out off the ice and I interviewed him, and this was just during warm-ups the morning of. And I said, Alex, why couldn't you have been born a lot of years earlier and I might still be coaching the Washington Capitals? And he looked down on me and he said, why did you quit? And I said, well, I know you're a young player in the National Hockey League, but breaking news, we NHL coaches don't quit. We get fired. He goes, I could get you your job back. And I said, I know you've got a lot of pull with the owner right now, but quite honestly, I like your coach, Glenn Hanlon. He's a friend of mine. He said, do you want the assistant's job? I couldn't stop laughing. Yeah. And in which case they were telling him in my ear is that they said, keep going, keep going. So not long after that, then Alex was a very proven star in the National Hockey League, and they decided at the Montreal All-Star game to have another opportunity for Gary and and the coach or for Alex and the coach to sit down. Alex would call me old coach every time he saw him in the dressing room. Hey, old coach. So in which case, in comes Alex, and he was a young player in the NHL then. He was actually the front cover story for Maxim magazine, and he had some beautiful women on his side, and he was coming for a sit down with me, and so we're starting, and just before we started the interview, I looked at him and I goes, "Life is pretty tough for you, Alex." He goes, "Hey, old coach, want to come out with me tonight?" And I said, "Hey, Alex, you know something? I can't afford a divorce, and so in which case, I think I'll just stay on my own here tonight." But Alex was just a fun-loving guy, and when I would talk to the teammates around him, they said, "You know something, Greener? He makes coming to practice fun every day. He's crazy, but he makes it fun." And boy, did he make it challenging on the ice for anybody that played against him. So I had personal feelings when they won the Stanley Cup for all of us who were Capitals, but also for Alex, because he'd gone through a lot of naysayers out there in the media. And I just thought that for him to hoist the cup, and boy, when he and Backstrom hoisted the cup out there in front of the Bellagio, they hoisted the cup.
Sure did. Wow. Same
Jerry,
question to you, Dennis Maruk. Maybe you can tell us about your feelings as you watched that Stanley Cup being hoisted by the Washington Capitals.
Well, I think it started me with getting to know Alex, Ovi there, and when the year he took over the scoring record in the Washington Capitals history, I was living in Aspen, Colorado, and they were going, all the reporters were going game by game, and we were right close right away. And then I was skiing when he was at number 59, and they called me and they said, "We'll talk to you tomorrow." I said, "That's fine." And I said, I was cheering him on. I mean, I was following his career. He's just a great goal scorer. The team was, of course, getting better. The only problem is they couldn't beat Pittsburgh. They had the hardest time beating Pittsburgh. And then Pittsburgh, give themselves credit. They had a great team too. They just couldn't get by them. Finally, they got by him. Finally, they beat him. And they go on. And I was there at the fourth game. And I had tickets. And my buddy had tickets in Vegas. And jet to go to the fifth game. Do you think I went? I said, no, they're not going to win in Vegas. They're going to come home and win in the sixth game. And I had everything set up. My grandson, who was 8 years old, his favorite hockey player is Ovechkin. It was all set up. It was a secret. He didn't even know about it. We were flying in for the sixth game, my son, my grandson, and all that. So I got it all set up afterwards that he met Ovi last year in Toronto. So it was no big deal. In Minnesota, sorry, when they played the Wild. But for them winning, I mean, it was so, to watch it as a Capital and knowing what we went through as Capitals players, the struggles, saving the Caps campaign and keeping that team going in the city, and how Ted took over and their Dick Patrick and the management staff and all to start drafting real good players, putting a good team together. I was excited, and when they start talking about the past, the players that were involved in this team, and the management, the coaches, and all, they were talking about over the air, and it was just nice to hear that we got complimented for what we did before they won it. So I felt part of it, and then also being asked to go when they had the red carpet last year. After the next year, and walk outside with all those guys. And so I have a relationship with Ovi over the years since that 60 goal. Every time I go there, we give each other hugs, we talk, and the same thing with Backstrom, because they realized what I did, and I cheered them on. So it was just an honor to be involved with that whole festivities that was going on there. And I'm sure Bernie remembers all that. I didn't get to the parade, but I certainly would have liked to have been there. But other than that, they're so good. But I question their new coach, though.
Interesting.
I would have taken Gallant.
Yeah.
That was my choice. I don't think Mr. Laviette's the choice. Sorry, but that's me.
We'll see what happens for sure. Fair enough. Glenn Dreyfus, why don't you unmute yourself here? Glenn Dreyfus has written a book. I haven't had the chance to read it yet, but it sounds amazing. The Legends of Landover, Long Lost Stories of the Washington Capitals. Glenn, maybe you can tell us a little bit about putting the book together and maybe some of the stories that haven't been covered yet today on our Zoom program. Welcome, Glenn. Thank you.
Well, thank you for including me. And I have a few stories that are in the book of things that haven't been covered. For instance, if that really is Bernie Wolf, because I have a hockey card that says he's Al McAdam. So
That card's worth a lot of money. But it is. I know the card that you're talking about. Yeah.
and they even did a revision of the card and got it wrong a second time.
Yeah. They reversed us, and I've got a Cleveland jersey on, but my face.
And the other thing about Bernie Wolf is I don't know if any of the other people on the panel have ever, well, Dennis got invited to the White House for the All-Star game, but Bernie got an individual invitation. So do you want to mention your invitation to the White House, Bernie?
Well, sure. My mask that I wore is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. They didn't want me, but they took my mask. But it's the Stars and Stripes. And it was the 1988 Olympics in Calgary. And President Reagan was there. And he saw the poster of my mask that was on display. And he asked his chief of staff, a gentleman named Ken Duberstein, go ahead and buy that poster and we'll bring it back to the White House, because it was the Stars and Stripes. And so Ken went over and said, I'd like to buy that poster. And they said, sorry, it's not for sale. He said, no, you don't understand. I'm the chief of staff to the most powerful man in the world. He's standing right over there, the president of the United States. No, sir, you don't understand. It's not for sale. So about a week later, my office manager says, Bernie, somebody's on the phone and they say it's the White House. I figured it's got to be one of my friends. But sure enough, it was Ken Duberstein. He said, Ken, this is Ken Duberstein, chief of staff to Ronald Reagan. He says, we were at the Olympic Games in Calgary and we saw a great poster of your mask. They wouldn't sell it to me. Can you help us out? The president thought it was great. So long story short, he had all the information, of course, as you would expect from the chief of staff. And I called him and I said, hi, I hear that you have a poster of my mask on display, and I'd like to get a couple of copies for my daughters. And they said, no problem, we'll overnight them to you tomorrow. And they sent me two. I called Ken and he invited me to lunch, supposedly with the president and him. The president couldn't make it, but we had a great lunch in what they call the White House mess. You're served by waiters in tails, and it's anything but a mess. It's very, very formal. And no one knew who I was. People were coming in. I'm sitting at the chief of staff's table with 16 phones on that table. And they're all looking at me because what's going on, you know, because no one knows who I am. And so it was very exciting. And then about a week later, I get an envelope from the White House that was from Ronald Reagan with a picture. Very unpresidential. I still have it up in my office. Dear Bernie, best wishes, Ronald Reagan. And
very nice.
Yeah, you know what? At the time, I was still a Canadian. I have dual citizenship, but when you heard Reagan speak, you were just proud, you know, being in the United States at the time, and just listening to him just made you proud. Of course, he was an actor, and so when he delivered something, it was really good. But yeah, so I went to the White House, and he gave me a lot of jelly beans, and I got cufflinks with his name engraved in gold
Very
in the back
nice.
with a presidential seal, and my wife got a pin that you wear on your lapel. So very exciting for me to be at the White House.
I don't know if you guys remember that the All-Star game, what Reagan said when we had the luncheon, when he got up and spoke, and he said he welcomed everybody and the players and all that. And he said, I just want to let you all know that we just made a trade. We traded, Washington Capitals traded for Wayne Gretzky, but we also had to give up the state of Texas. That was pretty cool, putting the politics and the hockey involved. That was pretty good, yeah.
Very. Glenn, why don't you give us another story?
Well, Gary Green, I was in the stands when Ken Houston scored for Atlanta with 3 minutes left. I don't want to give you nightmares, but I was in there to tie the game, and the Capitals didn't make the playoffs. And I was in the stands when the Capitals beat Detroit the next year, and then we all listened on the radio hoping Toronto would lose, but they didn't. But I don't want to make you talk about that. What I want to remind people is that the first time the Capitals ever beat Montreal, and it took 6 years, you were the coach. The first time the Capitals ever beat the Bruins, it took 6 years, and you were the coach. And I believe in the 7th year, were you also the coach the first time the Capitals beat the Flyers in Philadelphia?
I was just going to add that to it, Glenn, that we actually beat the Philadelphia Flyers. You know, as Dennis will remember, when we used to get the press notes in our hands before the game, and we'd be going through it and looking at different things, and I got so sick and tired, as I'm sure Dennis and our other players did when we read them, and saying, and for this is number of times that we played the X and X team, and that they have yet to beat the Philadelphia Flyers, or yet to beat the Montreal Canadiens. Thing, this is years now, and we still haven't even beat this team. And as a new coach, I was kind of like, I didn't know the history. I mean, I knew this team had some difficulties, but what do you mean we've never ever beat the Montreal Canadiens, or we've never ever beat the Philadelphia Flyers? So yeah, those I actually have the Montreal Canadiens and the Philadelphia Flyers one up in my office here, my Hall of Shame, that I have, and when you people get a kick out of looking at the names that are on that Montreal Canadiens roster, for example.
Gary, that Flyers game was an absolutely crazy game. The 344 penalty minutes.
Yeah,
and
it's
it
a
was
brawl.
a 44 save shutout for Palmateer. It was insane.
And as I remember, Dennis and Glenn, is that that Palmy, and here we were going to beat them, and Palmy, I believe, went running off into the corner, chasing a puck and trying to cross-check
somebody,
one of the Flyers players, and that which extended another brawl that we had. I remember going into Bugsy Watson's restaurant in Alexandria called the Penalty Box, and when I first went in there, he looked up and he goes, "You see this picture?" And I'm looking at it, and there was me standing on the boards, and I'm looking down. There's no players on the bench. There's nothing but gloves and sticks on the ice, and you don't see any players. And he said, "You remember that game?" I said, "Oh yeah, it was Philadelphia." No players, just me straddling the boards. And I don't know. Dennis was probably just gooning somebody up. I know.
Yeah.
He was probably just pounding away on one of those guys.
I was picking on Bob Daly. Yeah, I couldn't reach his head. He was 6.
I'd like to ask you, Dennis, if you don't mind. Do you still have your curly blonde wig? Because I read that before game 1 against Winnipeg during your 60-goal season, you came into the dressing room wearing a curly blonde wig.
You're right. I don't have it, but yes, you're right. Yes. And I think there's one picture that one night I scored a hat trick or something, and I'm wearing that wig as well. It's curly wig with 3 pucks in my hand. I don't know where it is, but no, I don't have it.
Glenn, let me just remind you of Dennis's humor, because we're playing in the old Calgary Saddle Dome, the first year that the Calgary Flames are in the National Hockey League. Corral. And those boards in the old Saddle Dome, the corral, were like 6 feet high, and they had 2 tiers benches. I've never seen such a crazy rink, and I'm thinking, how's this going to work? I mean, we were a line matching team and jumping on the fly. So there I am in the dressing room, and it's the pregame warm-ups, and I'm looking out as the players are going onto the ice, and there Dennis Maruk he's got this great big pack in behind his sweater on the back. And I'm going, what the hell is that? And one of the guys said, it's for Pee-wee, because if you're going to change on the go and he's got to fly over the board, jump over the boards, we need a parachute for him. Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh my God, help me.
Oh yeah, it was right. Oh yeah, it was crazy. That was probably the weirdest.
It was weird.
Dance I've ever seen. Yeah,
it was crazy because you couldn't jump over the boards. I mean,
oh no way. It was like me jumping off a house or something and landing on the driveway.
I just want to tell Bill Mickelson that he's actually the inspiration for me writing the book, because I read a Toronto Star article. They keep every 10 years they come back to Bill and they ask him about minus 82. Sports Illustrated does it. Everyone does it. And what impressed me was how Bill showed so much dignity and kindness in answering those questions. And I thought the real story, the human story, was not minus 82, but Bill's dignified way of answering the question. And he was a successful IBM executive, and with his kids having the success they did in hockey, this is a successful man. And what I wanted to do was tell the human stories, not just the stories about 8 wins that you can read about anywhere. So Bill, it's not so much a question, but I wanted to tell you, I've always admired the dignity that you've had about putting that kind of thing in perspective. And by the way, it was only minus 81. You got a minus you didn't deserve.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, you were off the ice for one of the minuses. But
that's the best news I've had all day.
Okay, that's all, Kevin.
We've got a viewer here that I just wanted to give a shout out to, because Dennis played against him, and a lot of you will remember him. It's a pal of mine, and he played in the National Hockey League. He played for me with the Peterborough Petes, Mark Curtin. He played with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings, as well as the Vancouver Canucks. Mark is battling ALS. And he is one of the great individuals. Now he should be a spokesperson for ALS, because his attitude and his motivation is unbelievable. He's still busy in his real estate practices, but he's been texting me back and forth, because the critic, as he always was, he's been analyzing our whole show here tonight, and so giving us all of our critiques. And so, in which case, just wanted to give a quick shout out, and again, wishing Mark Curtin and all of the people, though, that are experiencing ALS a big shout out, because Mark is one of the great individuals supporting the cause for more research for ALS.
Keep the fight, Mark. Keep the fight, Mark.
Absolutely. Let me, before we jump to you, Bill, first of all, Mark, you and I had a wonderful conversation not that long ago, so I'll echo what Gary had to say too. Thank you for joining us today as well. Just while we're doing so, we had a friend of this group, Bill Williams, who went through a liver transplant a week or so ago, and he's in our thoughts right now. He's coming through. It's a slow process, but we're sending our best thoughts to Bill as well. So Mark, thank you for what you're doing, and hang in. Bill, keep the faith, and good things around the corner. And now I throw it back to Bill to comment on your minus 81. There we go.
Oh, I wanted to comment on Glenn, and thank you very much, Glenn, for those kind words. I want you to know that in the email that was sent out, it mentioned you and your book. I was not aware of the book, so I ordered it on Amazon, and today I've been checking my doorstep all day, waiting for it to arrive. It might be there when I go upstairs. But thank you for the kind words, and I look forward to reading your book.
When we talk about teams that are not very good, we forget these are proud people. These are people who have had success in their careers. And it's too easy to take shots at teams that don't do well. As you said once, Bill, it may have happened, but it didn't mean it was all your fault. So there you go.
I've got all the excuses.
We need to have Courtney talk about the parade, the Washington Capitals Stanley Cup parade, and what she does.
Yeah. So hi, thanks for having me on. I did try to drag my dad, Craig Laughlin, but he couldn't make it here tonight. So I'm kind of his replacement.
You're better anyway. We don't want to
Courtney.
listen to. We don't want to listen to him.
Okay.
So
Okay.
better that you're on.
Okay. I'm the favorite Laughlin. I like it.
You got that.
That's right.
No, it's been really fun to listen to you guys, especially when you're talking about hockey through the ages, and you guys talked about the Save the Caps campaign. I was literally born, and then 2 days later my dad was traded to LA, so I wasn't around for the Save the Caps campaign, but I've heard my dad talk about so many stories about how you guys were, and I'm sure you guys, Dennis, you can talk about this, how involved you were in the community, and you talk about getting from there and being part of that organization to the Caps winning the cup. And it wouldn't be without you guys and how you guys saved the Caps from that era, because it's been fun for me to watch the evolution of my family. Has stayed in Washington ever since my dad retired, to see the evolution and how hockey has grown and become a great hockey market in Washington, D.C., that it wasn't back in the 70s and the 80s, even the 90s. And that's a testament to you guys, the guys that saved the Caps, that were part of the history of the Caps. And then obviously the new wave, the Alex Ovechkin era, that the Rock the Red era, that created so many fans. I will say this, I've been a part of the Caps now, covering them for several seasons. Obviously the Stanley Cup is the coolest thing that I've ever experienced in the Washington, D.C. area, and just covering the Caps and being able to celebrate the Stanley Cup with my dad also as a broadcaster. That was a really unique moment of us hanging out on the stage in front of hundreds of thousands of fans. I will tell you this, one of the coolest things that I experienced of interviewing fans and talking to fans, and I will say majority of those fans that were at the games, that were at just the watch parties when they were in Vegas for the Stanley Cup Finals, they were fans of you guys, Dennis. They were fans of that original team, that even though there was so much heartache, there was so much disappointment, there were so many playoff early round exits, that they stuck around because it was you guys that made them love the team so much. And it was just a really cool thing to experience and to watch. And I'll remember this. I'll always remember this. I was with my dad. I want to say it would have been one of the first two games when they were out in Vegas. So when they were doing those watch parties, and just hundreds of thousands of people on the streets watching the game. And there was a woman that came up to us and said, "This is my first ever hockey game." The hockey game wasn't even in DC, right? The hockey game's in Vegas, but she's just like, "This is the coolest thing. This is the coolest thing for DC. It's the coolest thing that I've ever been a part of." And she's a hockey fan for life now. So it's been really neat to see the evolution of the fans and how DC is a hockey town. I grew up playing hockey here. There was one women's hockey team in the area. Now there's several, there's dozens. And that's a testament to Alex Ovechkin and how he has helped grow the game to bring new fans in. You guys were talking about the celebration in the fountain, right? And how fun that was to watch. They brought the fans into that, right? Like I had people texting me being like, "I'm here with Alex Ovechkin at the fountain chugging a beer." So they made it so enjoyable for the fans, that all the sweat, all the tears, all the heartache that they had seen and witnessed and experienced, not just the players, but the players know the history of the team, right? I mean, they know what's happened. To be able to celebrate that with the fans and to bring the fans in, I thought was one of the coolest things.
Very, very cool. Thank you, Courtney. It's nice to bridge everything together from 74, 75 to 2018 and beyond. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's great.
This is a question for Dennis, especially since he mentioned Chris Valentine. What was a quick demise for him after his 30-goal rookie season?
I'm not the coach. Sorry. I don't know exactly. I don't know if it was the change of the game, the speed or whatever. Chris was not a fast skater. I only think that would be my only answer for that. I don't know what was going on. So, I ended up going traded in '83 to Minnesota. So, Chris played a few years and had a great career, and then ended up going over to Germany and having a great career over there.
Yeah, I was hoping to find out a little bit more about the infamous white pants that the Capitals wore their first few games in the league, and then the transition you guys made to red pants and red uniforms. Do you remember at all wearing the unusual color combination and the comments that maybe you heard from other from fans and players around the league?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Steve, because I just found a picture today when I was doing some of my research, and there was a picture of us playing. We wore those white pants. I only remember wearing them one game. Our opening game in 74-75 was against the Rangers at the Gardens in New York, and we had those white pants on. And I don't think any of us knew at the time that that's what we were going to be wearing, is white pants. And the only story I've heard about them is that I didn't experience it myself, but when they got wet, they became see-through.
Oh, jeez.
They became transparent. And some of you, the players here, will know that there's maybe some guys that you've seen in your career, and maybe it's just back from my day, that didn't wear underwear all the time.
Well, he's right about see-through. They became see-through and very embarrassing.
Courtney, cover your eyes. Todd Sawatsky. Todd, you've got a question of Glenn Dreyfus.
Yeah. What's the best way to get this book?
Well, first of all, your check's in the mail. You read that question just the way I wrote it. The Amazon and Barnes and Noble, just look up The Legends of Landover. It'll come up. There's also a website, by the way, if you look up The Legends of the Landover, where I have more than 1,000 pictures and 75 audio and video files. The other thing I'll mention about the book is I priced it at cost, $10, because I'm not interested in making a profit on it. I'd rather have people enjoy it. I thank you very much for asking the question.
Terrific. I hope a few people will avail themselves of this opportunity as well. Brian Lewis, why don't you unmute yourself? We always enjoy your questions and comments. Why don't you address our panel today as well, Brian? Thanks.
Well, first of all, let's be very clear here. Mr. Gary Green was a whiner and crier as a coach and used to drive me nuts.
Well, you never blew the whistle.
Now I got that off the books. Actually, he was a great guy to deal with. He was a great guy to deal with on the ice. I have two quick Washington stories. We stayed downtown Washington and went out to the rink, and you had to get into the express lane in order to do it. You drive the express. For us as three officials wasn't the problem, but you always saw people pulled over with those blow-up dolls that were pulled off to the side, trying to cheat and whatever. I remember that as being one of the things of being in Washington. The second one I had on a Saturday night, I had Philadelphia at Washington. Tough game, as Coach Gary made reference to. And then late at night, I got a phone call from Scotty Morrison saying a referee's been hurt. And he says, I need you to work Sunday night in Philadelphia. And I said, Scotty, I just had the same two teams Saturday in Washington. He said, look at it this way. I'll tell you how the sympathy I got. He said, then look at it this way. You got a 6-period hockey game. Go to it. Jeez. And I'll tell you what, the Sunday night game was tougher than the Saturday night game. Other than that, it was a great building to work in. And not of that, I recall being some famous players on the ice and guys that you dealt with. And today, just some really good people, not only in Washington, but throughout the NHL from days gone by. So I enjoy these things. And thanks very much, Kevin, for giving the opportunity just to sort of offload on Mr. Green, because quite frankly, he deserves it.
Always enjoy you, Brian. You're such a character, and we've enjoyed your time both here and at Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer as well. So yeah. Thanks.
Hey there, Bill. Yeah, so I'm from Manitoba too, and I guess my question is on that first team. Seeing as how it was a new group, Blair Stewart is from Winnipeg, Murray Anderson from the Paw, Ron Lowe from Bertle. Did you guys at all kind of have any sort of camaraderie, being all just Manitoba guys? And maybe you guys played against each other before, I'm not too sure, but was there any sort of thing like that when you guys were playing together that first year?
I knew Ron Lowe before. We played the Winnipeg Junior Jets. Ron Lowe was there, and then he and Butch Goring was there too, and then he and Butch, this is back in junior, they both went and played with the Dauphin Kings. I don't know whether, you know, that's what year, that's back in 68, 69, maybe in that time frame. So I knew Ron before, but as far as any affiliation with, you know, like being from Manitoba, not really. Murray Anderson, I'd played against. He'd been with the Bombers.
Right.
You know, when he was there in the Clark and Leach days. Jerry Hart was with the Bombers as well. I played with him in New York. I guess, you know, like, you know, like Butch and Ron are probably the two guys that, and Murray, that I remember best. Like,
Well, right on. I appreciate that. Thank you, Bill.
did I miss?
And
did
I should mention too that Bill
miss-
is in the Manitoba Hockey Hall of Fame. So there you are, taking
Yeah.
it one step further yet.
Right on.
Very good.
Bill,
Thank
can
you.
you tell me, and Bernie too, about Greg Jolly? Number one, first pick overall, great junior career, Memorial Cup, he was the star, and he never panned out. Do you remember anything about Greg Jolly?
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
great.
Greg was a, you know, really talented person, but first round draft choice on a 1974 expansion team with, I think maybe too much pressure was put on him and people expected too much from him. And it didn't pan out for him. I think he was put in a very difficult situation, but nice guy. And I know he stayed in upstate, I think it was Glen Falls, New York. And I believe that's where it was. And
Yeah.
had a good career there. And he, you know, I thought he was a quality guy and a talented hockey player. Just put in, you know, he would have done really well if he would have been picked up by the Montreal Canadiens or the Flyers. But being a first round draft choice on a weak team like what we had, you know, it was a tough deal for him.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
that was it was almost cruel he was on that team because, like you said, Bernie, he had all kinds of skill. He's a great player, a heads-up kid, but you know, like it was too much, too early. You know, they talk defensemen today shouldn't be, you know, you need 2 or 3 years of seasoning unless you're an exceptional player. And, you know, he should have had some more development. And I think it really would have helped him long term rather than getting stuck in there. And like you said, there was huge expectations for him that nobody could have met.
Hey, Laura Evans, why don't you unmute yourself? You want to address a question to Courtney Lachlan. Please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to find out what Courtney is doing now because she's involved with a bunch of things. And do you tell behind the scenes stories of the Caps? Is there something juicy that you can share with us?
No see-through clothing.
The first one's the easier question. Yeah, I've been trying to find some ways to be a voice for the Caps. I've obviously spent several years doing some broadcasting and pre and post game coverage. I've started my own, I guess, live sports show, primarily covering the Caps and all the other local sports here in DC. It's a Facebook live show that me and another woman are doing, and we just kind of talk about all the happenings really around the Caps. And she's a baseball fan, so she covers the Nationals, and I just ask questions about the scoring and other rules that I don't understand about baseball. So that's been fun, and we've been doing some podcasting just to kind of be a voice for the Washington Capitals hockey here in DC. So it's been fun to branch out and do the legit hardcore broadcasting stuff, but then some other things online to just have a platform to be able to talk about hockey. That's obviously my huge passion. grew up obviously around the game my entire life, played myself. So it's just, it's what I love. People say, why don't you talk about soccer or football? I'm like, no, hockey is it for me. That's what I love. And that's my huge passion. In terms of juicy stories, oh gosh, I don't know if I quite have any. I will say that, and not a lot of them revolve around the players that much. We did secretly, not secretly sneak in, but we got my dad into actually one of the Stanley Cup parties afterwards. And that was a cool moment for him because a lot of the players were excited that he was there. So we were around some of the Caps parties, not on the list. We kind of crashed them. I will say this though, the night that the Caps won the cup, obviously it was in Vegas. So what they did for the broadcasters is we watched it in the suite, and kind of like a terrible place to watch it because we're watching it delayed on the screen and then it's happening on the Jumbotron and the fans are cheering and really have no idea what's going on. We're trying to like keep track with the game, what's happening, who's scoring. And then with about 6 minutes left, you have to head out to the set, which was outside on F Street. So being in the suite with NBC Sports Washington, there was obviously a fridge, and there was a fridge that was stocked with alcohol. And so with a couple minutes left, my dad's like, okay, since he was on the first show, I was on the later show, he had to head out on the set. And him and a couple of the guys were like, Courtney, like, put all this beer in your purse because we think the Caps are going to win and we got to celebrate. And I'm like, great. So I'm the one that's like taking all of this beer out of the fridge, shoving it in my bag. And I don't know how many beers, a dozen or plus. And again, just as a way that we thought, hey, this is going to be awesome. We're going to celebrate the Caps winning. We need to have some alcohol, right? So we get out on set. Obviously, they win. It's mayhem. The fans are crazy. And we were on air probably till about 2:30. And just fans would not leave. An exhausting, but well worth it night. And my dad's show ended early, and it's the same set. They just changed the town and the broadcasters. And so I'm like, this is great. I can't wait to have a beer. It's 2:30, or just about when I was about to go on at noon. I see my dad sitting in the corner, like drinking all the beer. And I'm like, Dad, what about the beer for me? Then after we get done our show, and I'm like, guys, don't worry. I got beer. We can have a beer. We're going to celebrate. No, all the beer was gone. He drank it with Alan May and Al Koken and Brent Johnson. I'm glad they got to celebrate, but I'll just always remember that that moment of watching the clock tick down and watching the Caps win the cup. So I think I had more fun hearing from all the stories from everybody too. I only hear my dad's side, so it's like maybe a little lopsided.
Ask your dad one story. After he left the Caps, he was playing for the Kings.
Yep.
This is how well liked he was by his Caps teammates in the 80s. So they wouldn't hit him. They wouldn't body check him. And Brian Murray yelled out in LA, he said, he's not your friend anymore. You can hit him.
I've never heard that one. So that might be one that he's choosing not to tell me. So I'm going to ask him about that. I feel like he's selective with his stories that he tells me. But this was awesome. Thank you guys so much. And I'm sorry my dad couldn't make it, but next time, anytime you guys are talking Caps or any other things, just let us know.
I really, once again, want to thank all of you for joining us today, for some great questions, and for some outstanding panelists. I want to thank Bill Mickelson, Bernie Wolf, Dennis Maruk, Gary Green, Courtney Lachlan, and Glenn Dreyfus, and for his book, I should mention one more time, Glenn Dreyfus's book, The Legends of Landover, Long Lost Stories of the Washington Capitals. So thank you, gentlemen and lady, for joining us today and for really opening the door and peeling the layers back of the onion of the Washington Capitals through the last many, many years. So thanks for joining us, and thank you all for being with us.